Hey, thank you so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. If you've never been into this podcast before, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. What I do on this podcast is I give you 20 to 25-minute episodes of things that we go through, and I talk about why it happens and what we can do to work through it. My goal in this podcast is to just help shift the way you think. So if you find yourself feeling stuck in life, this platform is for you. I've been podcasting since 2018, July 2nd to be exact. And if you go back in time to older episodes, you'll find that I've been talking to people that are doing things to empower the lives of others. Uh, a couple years ago, that changed because I opened a wellness center and didn't have the capacity to interview people anymore. So I still wanted the podcast to continue going on. And so I come to you with these little short tidbits to help you shift your thought process. Now, if you are here, so I am doing a 5-part series on healing your inner child. This is episode 3 of a 5-part series. So if you are here, this is episode 519, and you haven't listened to 518 or 517, I suggest you pause it, stop it right now, head on over to the first part of the series on 517, where we introduce the inner child. 518 is where we understand the inner child in a different way and how it operates. So, how your experiences shape your adulthood, right? That is the second part. And today we are talking about nurturing our inner child. So, each of those episodes, you will have homework assignments, you will have insights, and I don't want you to rush through them. I want you to give yourself time to absorb the content. And that way you can actually work through it. I just want to also say working on your inner child is just a lifelong process, right? I've gotten so much insight into understanding myself better, and there are moments where my inner child still comes up, and I'm able to nurture it in a really great way. We're going to learn about that today. And it's allowed me to have more peace in life, right? I used to think like, how can I have peace when all of the things that has happened to me has happened? Like, how do you find peace in life? And having this awakening that like there is still joy, I can still have peace, has given me passion to want to share it with the world. And that's why I created this podcast. And if you're new to my platform, all the things I do is because I know there's a different way of operating in life, especially for people that are Black in America. I understand the way that the system was never designed for us and how that can sit in our psyche. So, a lot of the things that I do it because I understand and I've been there, right? And so, because I've been there and I feel like we all have a purpose in life, and I feel like my purpose is to help people heal. I have a way of reaching people where, regardless of your race, sex, socioeconomic status, I feel like my content tends to speak to people. So, let's jump into the episode. Again, if y'all ain't seen the last 2 episodes, 518, 517, please don't start here. Because I don't want you to jump into the content without seeing the other things. And also, if you're listening to me on audio podcast, this platform is also on YouTube. I'm a very visual learner. Like, I need to, when I was in college, I needed to see it, I needed to write it, I needed to hear it. I had so many ways that the way I learned is just so many different ways. So, um, I have visuals for you if that's something that is beneficial for you. So today we're talking about recognizing and nurturing your inner child. So understanding your inner child's voice. Just so we're clear, it's not like this little voice inside of you, like what, like am I hearing things? No. So inner child's voice, it doesn't sound like a literal voice, but rather a surge of emotions, needs, and reactions that feel disproportionately big for the adult situation at hand. This is signal, oh my goodness, it's signaling an unmet childhood need or an emotional wound being triggered. One thing I tell my clients, right? I'll say if the emotion doesn't fit the situation, there's probably something deeper. A lot of times this comes up in relationships, especially intimate relationships, where it feels like something big, like you're having this big feeling, and then you're looking at the situation and you're judging yourself. You're maybe even acting on that feeling, But deep down inside, you're like, I don't know what this is about. Like, why am I so erratic? Why am I feeling how I'm feeling over this one thing that took place, right? So, a lot of times when the emotion doesn't fit the situation, kind of check in with yourself because there could be something deeper going on. And a lot of times we don't know what's going on. And so we feel so bad for how we feel, you know? And so, how can this manifest, right? What does this look like? So, it can manifest as like sudden anxiety. You may have anger or sadness. Like for me, it would manifest mostly like a lot of sadness, especially at night. Like during the day, work, go to school, doing all these things at night when I was by myself. And I would feel it like this heavy surge would come over me. Sadness that doesn't fit the current moment, right? So, again, it doesn't fit the current moment. So I'm like in college, I'm doing all these things. I have a roof over my head, I have clothes over my back, you know, and I'm working in a field, with people that are unhoused, struggling with substance use, right? I'm working with people that don't have a lot of things and their necessities met. And so for me, I would always feel bad that I felt bad. Like, I'm like, why are you so sad? Like, what's wrong? I would want something to happen, right? I never planned anything to happen, but I would be like, man, if I could just like get hit by a car, if I can just something so that I can justify how I feel, right? And I know a lot of people feel that way, right? I'll never forget. I was going out. I remember I was going to the club, and there was a shooting that took place, and they were gonna wrap the tape. And I remember thinking like, oh, let me leave before my car gets blocked in. I was so desensitized to trauma, and I just hoped that something would happen so that I can have a reason. I'm putting that in air quotes for people that are not watching me on YouTube. I wanted a reason for how I'm feeling because God forbid I can't, like, the experiences that I've had, they've always been a part of me. And this is the thing. We tend to not understand that the things that's happened in the past, how they affect us in the present, right? I meet with people on day one, they talk about this story and they'll be like, yeah, but that was 20 years ago. I said, yeah, but that was your experience. So how could you just like callously say that was 20 years ago? We're not taught on how things continue to pass on and how they show up in our lives, right? And so it's really important to have compassion with yourself as you're experiencing these things. And we'll continue to talk about that as we move forward. But the compassion has really been a game changer for me when it comes to being able to recognize that inner voice that's coming up. So sadness that doesn't fit the current moment, but it feels like a younger self's emotional flashback. You might also notice behaviors like people pleasing. That was me. Avoidance, negative self talk, or craving attention, which stem from an unhealed child like part of your personality. So these are some of the ways that your inner child's voice can tend to come up, right? And so if any of these things fits you, I do need you to like just pause and reflect, right? There's something powerful about having like a diagnosis or a better understanding on what's going on. I feel like a lot of times we're going through the motions of life, we're struggling because nobody's talking about it. We're finding ourselves feeling bad for how we're feeling instead of saying like, "Oh, I'm an adult. These things have happened. That's why I feel how I feel." This healing my inner child work has been a game changer in the love, self-love, the peace that I have for myself. Common signs that indicate the inner child is seeking attention, right? Our inner child is with us, right, until we die. And signs that you may be seeking attention, your inner child. It often manifests as feeling emotionally overwhelmed, right? I would always feel emotionally overwhelmed. Low self esteem is another one. Attention seeking behaviors like interrupting, excessive talking, acting out, or seeking constant validation. Other indicators include emotional dysregulation, fear of abandonment. The fear of abandonment is huge. I know a lot of people struggle with that fear of abandonment, right? So you'll notice this in some of your relationships, right? Friends, family. You allow certain things to take place because you don't want to lose them, but then you're losing yourself in the process, right? But this inner child is afraid of being alone. Difficulty with boundaries, right? That goes hand in hand. Like when I think about the fear of abandonment and So you allow your boundaries to be crossed, right? Because, or bound, you don't even know what they are. You never even identified them for yourself, because you don't want to lose those relationships, or general neediness for reassurance from others, right? Um, when we are constantly seeking validation from others, right? I always ask people, like, what is that? And what is your inner voice saying? Like, do you validate yourself? Like, I get validation from others, but I promise you, when I started coming online years ago, um, my voice was powerful. Like, I just cared about my, like, I just noticed my voice as the thing that stood out. And then over the years, I've gotten validation, obviously feedback from people, that enjoy my content. But when I think about the the first step to me kind of stepping out of my comfort zone and doing these things and having joy and peace, it was like that voice inside of me just started to have so much more compassion and care. Let's reflect. Let's take a pause, right? I just said a lot. So I want you to take a moment to reflect on when you last felt a strong emotional reaction. Consider what your inner child might be trying to communicate in those moments. Somebody listening to this may be like, it just happened just now, right? Or it just happened yesterday. If you need to pause this podcast, come back to it, please do. But just take some time to reflect. Like, when was the last time I felt that, right? I mean, people who work with me get the pleasure of being able to process these things in our sessions. And I do understand therapy is not accessible for everyone. And sometimes it's just hard to find the right therapist. And I originally started this podcast just because of that, right? Like, when I started therapy back in my early 20s, it was I don't remember the lady's name, but she was really good. But that's how that's how disassociating I was in my life during that time. And but it worked, it was helpful. And so, and I had health insurance because I've always worked. So I took for granted that people may not be able to find a therapist or have insurance until I became in private practice in 2015. And I started to realize, like, oh snap, like, everybody doesn't have access to therapy, because all you hear is like, get a therapist, get a psychiatrist, but nobody talks about the fact that it's not always accessible. And that's what birthed this podcast in 2018, because I wanted people to know, like, there's other ways of healing. So take a second to reflect, right? When was the last time you had a strong, intense emotional reaction? And consider, what was my inner child trying to communicate to me in these moments? So, nurturing and validating your inner child. Why is it so important to nurture your inner child, right? So this is important, right? Because the more we nurture our inner child, the inner child will stop trying to, like, come up like a tsunami, right? Like, something happens and the tsunami happens. You may be the person, or you may know somebody where you be like, dang, I was acting like a kid. Why their responses come out that way? Because that inner child is leading the way, right? Do you really want your 10-year-old self in that state to always take charge, right? Because sometimes the emotion, so if I struggle with having a fear of losing someone, because let's say when I was younger, I lost somebody and nobody ever talked about it. And then that emotion comes up. I'm about to be 43, y'all. At 43 years old, that emotion comes up. And if I'm not mindful that this emotion's coming up in this moment, but it's not the same thing that happened when I was 10 years old, my 10-year-old self is going to lead the way. So you can't help sometimes the emotion that comes up, but if you're not aware of it, some of your decision making begins to happen because of something in the past, right? Does that make sense? So, and 2020, something can happen at 10 years old, 20 years later, at 30 years old. The emotion that happened at 10 years old can feel exactly like what's happening right now in this moment. And that's because our mind doesn't have concept of time. Logically, I know it's 2025, but my mind doesn't have access to that logic, right? So, the importance of nurturing, right? So, nurturing your child is essential because it allows you to address and heal your emotional wounds, leading to greater self acceptance, improved self esteem, and more resilient, authentic adult self, right? When you can work on becoming aware of what's happening in real time, you're not going to find yourself always responding to things in a way that you regret in the future, or a way that makes you feel bad or feel drained, right? So by validating your inner child's unmet needs, the fears that come up and the feelings, you're providing the self-love and compassion that may have lacked in the past, ultimately fostering that inner peace, emotional regulation, and healthier relationships. A lot of times those unmet needs weren't because there was abuse in the home, right? Sometimes there was abuse in the home, but sometimes it literally was because your parents didn't know that you needed that or had the capacity to give that to you. Everything, some people may say like, oh, like my parents was good or I had a good life, and so that doesn't negate the fact that some of your emotional needs were not met. Some things may have happened and you didn't get clarity on it, right? It wasn't processed. And so when it's not processed, your mind is still processing it and making sense of it. And sometimes it can seem faulty the way it makes sense. And then you can grow up and start to believe that faultiness that takes place, right? If my parent came home drunk, upset all the time because they had a bad day at work, and they start becoming angry with me because my shoes out, or like nothing's ever right, right? I start feeling like I am not enough, or I start feeling like everything I do is wrong, right? Because my parent came home under the influence, screaming, angry, and would point out things that was not right, then I can hold on to that and become a whole adult. And even though I've done things well, they'll never feel right because nobody's ever processed that thing of the parent coming home and creating all this chaos. Nobody ever said, hey, Celeste, that wasn't your fault, right? So then as you become older, you don't realize your personality is being built by the experiences that you're having. And a lot of times people aren't having conversations with you. They're not saying like, hey, like you're not a bad person, this is wrong, what's going on. Life is just lifing for you, right? And so some of the ways that we start to think and act, and some of the ways that we are so hard on ourselves, has a lot to do with some of the experiences we have had. And so if we can like work on understanding those emotions when they come up, having compassion when they come up, life will start to look a little different for us because we won't be so consumed, like our system won't feel so consumed with all of these emotions that we have a hard time expressing. So you may be like, okay, Celeste, you want me to nurture my inner child? What does that look like, right? I want to give you, and if again, I should have said this at the top of the podcast, but definitely take notes, right? Because these are things you're going to go back to. I'm gonna do this 5-part series, but you can always go back to this content to like refresh yourself, right? To go over it over and over again. It's important. Like these things that I'm talking about, I constantly do them. I don't just do them one time and it's like, hey, yeah, I'm healed. No, I have so much compassion with myself, right? So I'm gonna give you 3 categories if you are listening and not watching. But it says self-compassion, positive self-talk, and creating a safe space for emotions. So when it comes to self-compassion, treating yourself like your friend. When people talk to me about um, they'll talk to me about something that they're going through and how they speak to themselves. And if they have a kid or a friend, I say, oh, this is how you would talk to your daughter, or this is how you would talk to your friend. And people get emotional because they start to realize, like, why am I so hard on myself? So be mindful on the way that you talk to yourself, practicing self-soothing statements like, you know what, today was hard, but it's going to be okay, right? Not like, oh, today was hard, it sucks, like F this. Like sometimes we don't realize like we're walking around with a big bully. We're walking around. How do you heal when you're constantly being negative? It's really hard. Accepting imperfections, things just won't always go right. Sometimes things are going to go wrong. Sometimes you're going to make a mistake and it's okay. But if I stay with that example, I grew up with a parent that's always so angry and comes home and takes it out on me. And so obviously that inner dialogue is not my voice, it's that parent's voice that was angry all the time. When things go wrong, it's hard for me to have compassion because I remember all those moments where I didn't have it, right? So maybe work on reminding yourself like, hey, like this didn't go well, but it's okay, right? I'm a good person. Like being mindful of accepting their imperfections. So that self-compassion, positive self-talk, challenging those negative thoughts. The negative thoughts are going to come. You can't help it. I can't help it, right? Anytime I'm starting something new, it's like, oh, Celeste, can you really do that, right? Like anytime I have this like wave of emotion, something, this negative voice may come in, but I challenge it at the door. So I love analogies. If you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know I love analogies, and I've used this before. But if you have an unwanted guest and you they knock on your door, right? In this case, with the negative thoughts, they don't knock on your door. They just come in. They just busting through, right? And so if somebody comes in your house and just busting through, are you just gonna let them stay on your couch and stay there? Right? A lot of times our negative thoughts have had free reign in our life, in our house, right? So the negative thought comes in, it's sleeping on the couch, and it's chilling, it's not paying rent. All of a sudden you want to call yourself like reframing negative thoughts. It's going to have a You're going to have a challenge with like replacing it. It's going to be hard. If somebody's been staying in your house rent free and all of a sudden you want to charge rent or say you got to go, it's going to take some time to get them out, right? Because they may push back, things happen. And when it comes to negative thoughts, a lot of times we don't realize we've allowed our negative thoughts to win. We've allowed this thought to come in. It starts like as a seed, right? It starts as something small. I'm trying to see if I have something to show you to kind of, let's say like it started like this. If you're looking at it, I have it on the video. I have a top. It starts as a top. This is the thought. And so if we don't say like, oh, that's not true, like I can do this, right? Let's just talk about this podcast I started in 2018. The idea came to me in the beginning of January 2018, and I gave myself a date, July 2nd I was going to start. Let's say the thought came and it says, Celeste, can you really do this podcast? If I don't tend to it, it can grow. You see this little tree I got back here? It can grow into something like this, like real big. Like how something this small grows like this, because we let it flow. And I promise you, if you're allow that negative thought to come in, your mind will help show you ways to confirm it. Right? The same way, whatever car you're driving, you're seeing that car everywhere. Everybody ain't got your car because you got the car. And everybody said, oh, all of us, you have a red Toyota. Oh, let me get a red Toyota. Everybody didn't go out and get a red Toyota. You're seeing the red Toyota every single day when you go outside your house. So that's why your mind can easily point it out. I'm telling myself I can't start this podcast. My mind starts showing me ways that I cannot start this podcast. What helps me get going and start this podcast now from 2018, we're in 2025 and I'm still flowing. Why does that happen? Because I start to tell myself, nope, actually I can start this podcast and it's going to be great. It's going to be good, right? My goal is I want to heal people across the world. People listen to me around the world, right? So being mindful on challenging those negative thoughts, because if you don't challenge those negative thoughts, I promise you they're going to win. They're going to stop you from succeeding. They're going to have you on your deathbed wishing that, like, what did I do with my life? Why didn't I just do what I needed to do? Not realizing, like, I'm stopping myself from succeeding. Acknowledge your strengths. That's important. A lot of times we just acknowledge what's not going well, what we can't do. We don't acknowledge what we can do, right? Coming from a strength-based place is so important. As a therapist, I am very strength-based oriented, right? Yeah, we'll talk about what's not happened, but we're going to talk about what is happening, right? And so I need you to be mindful that you're doing that for yourself. And then just using encouraging phrases to yourself. It's important. I can't stress that enough. You're with yourself 24/7. Are you walking around with somebody encouraging, or are you walking around with a bully 24/7? Which one feels better? Granted, if you've never had this said to you in this way, or have done that, I understand how challenging it can be. But I promise you, if you work on it intentionally daily, eventually your mind and body will have no other choice but to fall in line with the direction that you're taking it. That same car example I used, right? If that's the car example, let's say you're so used to negative thoughts, if you start speaking positive over your life, your mind starts to show you the ways things can happen. There are so many things that I'm working on right now in this moment that I have worked on up until this moment. And it's not because I'm a genius. It's not because I'm very smart, right? I have a lot of weaknesses around learning. I just told you it takes me a while to learn. What my diligence, my consistency, and also I picture myself in the space that I want to be. So I visualize it, and what happens is my mind starts to show me the possibilities. So even though that negative thought's coming in, it's hard for it to take up any space because I'm constantly visualizing the direction that I'm going. And then the last section is creating safe space for emotions, right? Journaling is a great tool. I can't stress this enough. I even have a guided journal I created called 365 Days of Intentional Living, where I'm point if you're watching me on YouTube, you can see it. But each day I ask you a different question. I ask you how you're feeling. But you don't need to buy my journal to journal. You can get a notebook. You can use your notes app in your phone, right? Journaling is a great way. Mindfulness, right? Just taking time to be still. If that feels hard, you can go on YouTube and type in like 5 minute meditation, right? Like try to start sitting with yourself so you can get more clarity on what's going on. Let me be clear, if you've never sat with yourself before, this can feel like a very daunting task. And that's why I say start small, right? Maybe you start with 2 minutes, next week, 3 minutes, the next week, 4 minutes. Start to build it up, right? Setting boundaries, right? Nurturing your inner child means you got to protect it. Setting boundaries can be one of the hardest things you have to do. Saying no can feel so hard. A lot of times when people aren't used to saying no, it feels like they're doing something wrong. I get it, right? Be mindful of like what boundaries you're trying to create it because create for yourself where are the areas that you feel like you're lacking boundaries, because if you don't identify that, what's going to happen is you're going to allow any and everything to go on. If you start to identify your boundaries, write it down and make it plain, I promise you your mind will help you start to remember the thing that you said you wanted to do, right? It's not going to be an easy overnight transition, but I promise you it's possible. And then other way you can allow your self to be nurtured. Allow your emotions to flow. Stop judging yourself for how you feel. I told you I used to feel bad that I felt bad. Now I don't feel bad no more. I'd be like, oh my gosh, Celeste, that must have been so hard. When these emotions come up, I identify the emotions. I use a feelings wheel. A feelings wheel can be your best friend, and I allow my emotions to flow because guess what? I'm not a robot, I'm human. When people be like, oh, I'm sorry for crying, why are you apologizing for being human? Right? They laugh and they're like, you're right, you're right. We don't really think about it because a lot of times, if we were sad, it's kind of like, what are you sad for? You got food on your table, clothes on your back, right? That's the kind of mentality a lot of us have grown up in. And so, even as an adult, when we're feeling sad, we be doing the same thing to ourselves. It's like, why are we doing that to ourselves? We're not being fair at all. Some techniques to connect with your inner child, right? That's important to continue connecting, and you may find that that's something that has been challenging for you, or you may not have thought about what that really looks like. So you can write a letter to your younger self. That's something. Engaging in play and creative activities like drawing. On this picture, you could see somebody blowing bubbles, right? Just think if you've ever done something, played at a park with your kid, or ran, or anything that was related to your childhood experiences. How'd you feel when that happened, right? That's you connecting to your inner child. Practicing visualization and guided meditation to picture and comfort your inner child. If you have a hard time doing that on YouTube, I'm all about free resources. On YouTube, you can type in guided meditation for inner child visualization and it'll come up, right? Like different people's voices will come up and will like walk you through a guided meditation for free. Journaling to understand your emotions and needs. We talked about that. And then engaging in self compassion by giving yourself love and care you might have lacked as a child. These are important, right? So, again, something happened 20 years ago. You didn't get the love, and you're thinking, like, well, why am I still struggling? Because now I'm an adult. Because it's a part of who you are, right? You're still you, regardless of how much years have gone by. Your experiences have affected you in some way, whether good or bad, right? They've created this person that you are today. And even, as you're working on this process and you're maybe grieving the life you didn't have or didn't realize you didn't have, I also need you to be mindful that you're not judging yourself for the choices that you've made because you had to do what you had to do to get through moments in life, right? So just be mindful, like as we're working on this journey, we're working on it with compassion. I need you to have more compassion for yourself. Um, oh, I went backwards. Okay. So some practical exercises for home that you can do. Journaling prompts. So set aside a few minutes each day to check in with your inner child. You can ask questions like, what do you need today? Or how are you feeling? Right? That the question, how are you feeling, is a question I'm constantly asking my kids at night for our check-ins, but in general, like, how did you sleep? How are you feeling? Right? And I make them actually use the feelings wheel, give me an emotion off the feelings chart. And then playful activity, you can visit a park, engage in your favorite childhood game, or watching a nostalgic movie. One of like my favorite movies were like Aladdin King and Beauty and the Beast, and every time I watch it, or Three Ninjas or Home Alone, there's this like feeling that comes up that allows me to kind of connect with my inner child. Whew, let's just take a deep breath if you still with me, because that was a lot, right? That was a lot. So now we're going into our homework assignment. And so, these assignments are here to help you reconnect with the content. And so I have three different things that you can do, or you can do them all, right? So we're going to start with thinking about a daily check-in. So setting 5 to 10 minutes aside each day to check in with your inner child, find a quiet space, asking what does my inner child need and how am I feeling, right? That's one. Number two, you can journal, right? That's one of the things. So writing a letter to your inner child. In this letter, you can introduce yourself as the adult you are now, right? Express love, understanding, and support as you're writing it. Acknowledge any feelings or experiences your inner child may have gone through. And then offer reassurance and encouragement for healing and growth. So, this is an example on something you can do. If you prefer, like, you know what, I'm gonna do the daily check-in, that's great. If you're a writer and you want to like get into your creative bag, that's great too. And if you are somebody that does creative expression, right? Engage in a creative activity that resonates with your inner child. So you can draw or color a picture that represents your inner child. You can write a short story or a poem about a favorite childhood memory, or play a game or doing any activity you love, right? These are three examples on things that you can do to help you go through and really think about this content that we had today about nurturing your inner child. Something that is helpful. And then some reflections. So, after completing the activities, take a moment to reflect on the experience. So, I want you to consider, if you decide to do this homework, and again, I hope you're taking notes. And obviously, you can pause this, replay it, whatever. If you're not on YouTube, find me on YouTube, Celeste the Therapist, because it's all written too. Um, what emotions surfaced during the check in or a creative activity? How did it feel to connect with your inner child? And then what insights did you gain about your needs and feelings? These are really great reflection points. Um, so what's next? We have two more episodes left of this series, right? We are in 2 weeks. I'll be back to talk about healing techniques and strategies. And then the last episode in this series, we're talking about moving forward and integrating the inner child. Because, we're moving, like I said at the beginning, like, regardless of how much work I've done, I feel like I can still feel it, my inner child come up. And so I want to talk about that. Like, what does that look like? How do we move forward? We're gonna all you can always cycle through these episodes again, right? We get to episode 5, right? And then 3 months later, you're like, you know what? Let me go and refresh my memory. That's the beautiful thing about me creating this podcast, is that it's free. Everybody has access to it. And I'm creating this content in a way where you can take notes and feel like you're in an actual class, right? I got to give resources because this content's hard. And also, like, if you need to take a break from the content, I understand. I hope you understand, self compassion. But there is a lifeline number you can call. So, using 988 Lifeline, you can text or chat on this lifeline, and it's confidential. You can also talk to a crisis counselor for free, 741-741. These are two resources. Obviously, your therapist, if you have a therapist, is great. Somebody that you trust is great, right? Um, I love this content, but I also know this content can feel heavy and bring up a lot of things. So I just want you to know, like, if it's bringing up a lot for you and it feels hard, it's okay. You're human. Remember, we're going to have self-compassion and self-love. And if you want to find me, so like I said, I have a wellness center located in Stoughton, Massachusetts. You can find my website, stwyt.com. We have therapists that are available to work with you if you're looking for that. We have in-person somatic classes. We have sound healing, mindful yin, rest and recharge. We have trauma-informed yoga, and we have a restore class Friday night, the last Friday of every month. So if you're looking for to work on some somatic work with your body and you're in the Stoughton area, check us out. You can find us on social media, stwyt.com. It stands for Shifting the Way You Think. If you want to follow me, find me personally. I'm at Celeste the Therapist. You can find me at Celeste the Therapist everywhere. You can also find me celestetherapist.com everywhere as well. Thank you all so much for rocking out with me. If you've been here from the beginning of the series, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And until next time, beautiful people, I will talk to you later.